launch right into it.
All right, we made it.
Sounds good. So we're getting this started. Is that it? Okay, so we're live. All right, why not? So bon après-midi. Thank you all to the students for being here today. Minister McKenna, Ms. Brazeau, Mr. Gadd, we're pleased to welcome you to the Canada Aviation and Space Museum this afternoon to launch our Talk Energy Week live stream event. So welcome as well to all of you, the students, and we're really happy that you're here with us here today. But before we get started, I wanted to set the context a little bit for what we're going to be doing for the next hour or so. So Talk Energy Week is a National Energy Awareness Week devoted to people learning and talking about energy systems, energy use, and climate change. Talk Energy Week is part of the museum's multi-year Let's Talk Energy initiative, which is designed to help increase energy literacy from coast to coast to coast and to help promote informed discussion on energy and climate with all Canadians. La semaine Parlons Énergie a vu le jour en 2014. Au cours des trois...
The first Talk Energy Week was held in 2014. Though these past 3 years we have held events in every province, in every territory, and we've reached more than 3 million Canadians.
Canal has reached a new high point for Talk Energy Week. Our goal of increasing Canadian awareness about energy and its impact on climate so that we can make informed choices for a prosperous and sustainable future. So the purpose of today's live streamed panel is for all of us to learn about climate change from those who have experienced it firsthand and what each of us can do in a meaningful way about changing climate. Permettez-moi de vous présenter sans plus tarder nos trois invités.
Let me introduce our three panelists.
For the riding of Ottawa-Centre in October 2015, elle a été nommée au premier cabinet Trudeau à titre du ministre de l'Environnement et du Changement climatique.
She was appointed to Prime Minister Trudeau's first cabinet as Minister of Environment and Climate Change. The post she has held since then.
In downtown Ottawa for the unveiling of the new Climate Change is Here traveling exhibition in partnership with National Geographic. Minister, you'll be happy to know that the exhibition did travel to Mexico City and is on its way back to Canada for the spring. Notre deuxième invité, Andrea Brazeau.
Our second panelist, Andrea Brazeau, was born and raised in a small community on the east coast of Ungava Bay in Nunavut in the northern Quebec, Kangiqsualujjuaq.
Closer than this morning, au Nunavik, au nord du Québec. Living in the north, Andrea has seen personally how the Arctic is changing in profound ways, and she's working hard to raise awareness about climate change and how the warming temperatures are affecting Inuit people. Last December in Winnipeg, in the presence of His Excellency, the Right Honourable David Johnston, the Governor-General of Canada, Andrea co-hosted the annual Arctic Inspiration Prize award ceremony with Canadian Olympian Claire Hughes. The awards honor people who are succeeding at making positive change for the benefit of the Arctic and its people. Andrea vit actuellement à Montréal, où elle a entrepris des...
Andrea currently lives in Montreal, where she is pursuing post-secondary studies.
He's an internationally known ice climber and Red Bull athlete. He's won 3 gold medals at the X Game at the Ice Climbing World Cup and is a fan favorite of my 12-year-old son. I was forced to say that today. He's a big fan. So Will is also an advocate for addressing climate change, and he uses experiences in extreme sport to demonstrate how the natural environment is actually being impacted. As an ice climber, he sees the effects of climate change firsthand. Last December, Will and 2 of our Let's Talk Energy team members joined a full expedition group who were the first people to descend into Alberta's Athabasca glacier to explore the effects of climate change from inside the glacier. The 3D expedition's objective was to create a video series to showcase the impacts of climate change on the Canadian landscape through the lens of extreme sports. Donc, j'aimerais à présent céder la parole à Catherine McKenna, le ministre.
I would like now to introduce Catherine McKenna, Minister of Environment in Canada, to speak.
Alors, merci beaucoup, Alex.
Thank you very much. Est-ce que j'ai un... Je voudrais changer les images.
So do we get Red Bull to make our presentations more lively?
As much as you want.
Anyway, I'm really thrilled to be here. I love hanging out with young people. I spend a lot of time hanging out with young people because I have 3 kids. They're 8, 10, and 12. And they are a reminder every single day about why my job is so important, why we all need to work together to tackle climate change. Clearly, we have a huge challenge, and it makes me really sad that most of you have spent your life growing up thinking about climate change. But I think there's a huge opportunity to work together. Je sais que vous avez de très bonnes...
I know that you have wonderful ideas, and I really want to listen to your ideas. I think that you, the youth, know that we're facing an incredible challenge and that we need to work harder.
Too hard, we're not, what's the point of doing anything? You guys know that this is a huge opportunity, and you also know it's your future. I'm going to start by recognizing we're on the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. And that's something I think I take very seriously, because in my work, our Indigenous peoples, our First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people are the first stewards of our air, our land, and our water. And very sadly, often they're the ones to see the first impacts of climate change. I witnessed a really sad conversation when I was in Paris in the climate talks. When I was in Morocco at the recent climate talks, where you had an Inuit leader who was talking to the leader of a small island state. And basically it went like this. My homeland is melting, and it's flooding your homeland. It's pretty sad. So we all need to work together, and I think there's a huge opportunity, and that's why I'm actually an optimist in this role. I really think that we can get it right. We're smart. We're a wealthy country. We have young people who are committed to climate action, and we're getting everyone else on board. So actually, that's a picture with some young female scientists. Pretty awesome. It's a solar panel that they're showing me, and this is out at UBC. So here I am. This is when I started my job. So when I was named by Prime Minister Trudeau, to be the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. So first of all, I almost fell off my chair because I said, oh, wow, that sounds really like a big job. But pretty quickly, within a few days, I was actually sent off to the Paris climate negotiations. They're called COPs. You know that COP21 you probably heard about, just had COP22, Conference of the Parties. But I was starting from ground, literally at the very beginning. So I said to what's this COP thing? So that's where I started. But I jumped in. You can see there. It's not something glamorous. Some people like talking about how we all went to Paris and hanging out. In fact, we were in rooms like this, negotiating all through the night to try to come to an agreement with all the countries around the world. And that was the thing that was really amazing about the Paris Agreement, that you had 195 countries that actually for the first time came together to say climate change is real, we're going to take serious action to tackle climate change, and each country is going to have their own plan.
Here, I went from Paris back to Canada, and last year we had negotiations with my counterparts in the provinces and territories.
My counterparts from the provinces and the territories to get a climate change, a Made in Canada climate change plan. It was really hard, but in the end, I was very proud. You have here the Prime Minister with all the First Ministers, the Premiers of the provinces and territories, for the first time, Indigenous leaders are there announcing our climate plan. Included doing something that I think is really important, putting a price on what we don't want, putting a price on pollution so that we reduce our emissions, and we also get new innovations. I also learned pretty quickly in the negotiations in Canada and internationally that we all have to be in this together. And that's why you guys are so important. We need young people to really be pushing us to say this is serious. We need to find solutions, and we have some ideas. I know you guys have ideas. You have there at the top, I'm with Mayor Don Iveson from Edmonton. And hi there, everyone on Facebook. I don't know, hopefully we have some folks from Edmonton. Cities are certainly part of the solution. Apparently 40% of the emissions come from cities. They're within their control. So actions that cities take can make a really big difference. I was also on the right-hand corner. You can see I'm with the Premier of Nova Scotia. Below here, I am with the former Vice President, Joe Biden, from the United States. So we worked very closely with the Obama administration on the Paris Agreement, but a whole other series of actions that are really important to reduce emissions. And there's my Chinese counterpart, Minister Xie. And China has really stepped up on the climate change front. Largely, why? Does anyone know why? Anyone been to China? Been to Beijing? it's really hard to breathe some days. So that's actually a real thing. When you take climate action, you actually improve health outcomes. When you take action to reduce emissions from coal in particular, which are very polluting, you improve the air quality. And we know that there are huge numbers of people who are dying premature deaths from exposure to air pollutants. And he and I worked very closely together. I also led a trade mission. I was the first environment minister to bring, this is great, I have like these cards here, hurry up, go faster. I'll just talk faster. Anyway, we did a trade mission, which was really interesting because we have solutions here in Canada that are huge opportunities, because in China they said, we need your solutions for cleaner air, cleaner water, and soil remediation to clean up the soil, waste. And the great news is that these solutions that we find here are going to create good jobs and also opportunities to export to other countries. So it's a win-win. I've always said the environment and the economy go together. L'environnement et l'économie vont de pair.
Environment and economy goes hand in hand.
Here I am at our youth summit. So we had here on the left a really great youth summit. Who was at the youth summit? Any of you guys? Yay! It was awesome, wasn't it? It was fun. I mean, you could do these for a lot longer. It wasn't like the longest. It was day, but I think we had some really, really great conversations. We had breakout groups, and it was really interesting to hear some of the ideas. You have here, we did town halls across the country. So I would go, as well as other members of parliament, did town halls just to hear from local communities. And the reality is everyone has solutions. Everyone knows that there are things we need to do. So where are our emissions coming from? And this is what I spent all year trying to figure out how do you reduce emissions. They're coming from heavy industry. So for example, oil and gas industry. We need to innovate. We need to reduce emissions. We need to move towards renewables. Coming from buildings. Why do we not have better buildings? We have huge emissions coming from our buildings. It would save us money. They come from transportation. We know that we could use, that we could have better transportation. We could have more electric vehicles. People could take better public transportation. These are all things as a government we're committed to investing in. All right, so really this is my call to action. I never go to a meeting without having an ask. Alors ici, j'ai une demande pour vous tous.
Alors, I have a call to action for you guys. We have a contest for you, for all students aged from 18 to 25, maybe 26, maybe you're slightly younger, but you can participate. So,
Aged 18 to 26, I want you to pitch us your ideas. Pitch the government, what is your really cool idea? So it could be, how do you reduce emissions? How do you come up with emissions so their air is cleaner? How do you reduce food waste? Food waste is a huge problem, produces methane, and also the energy involved in producing those foods. How do you stop the spread of invasive species? We're really seeing with the climate changing, we're seeing all these species in areas they shouldn't be. I'm actually having a ministerial meeting today with my counterparts from the provinces and territories to talk about this. Marine litter, it's really disgusting how we have areas the size of Texas with plastic bags in our ocean. That is terrible. So these are all areas that I'm looking for your ideas and your solutions. And if you don't just do it for fun, il y a un prix de $5,000. So there's
we have a $5,000 prize
from the US and Mexico. I have a meeting in Prince Edward Island, so you will get to come as a winner to Prince Edward Island, come to the meeting and talk about your idea. Because really, I want everyone to feel part of it, and there is no monopoly on older people having good ideas. I know you guys have good ideas. Je sais que vous avez tous.
I know that you have all good ideas. And together, we have to work hand in hand to find solutions.
Time, it's like time's up. All right, see, look, I'm done. Alors, tout est possible. Everything is possible. I think we have a huge opportunity. It's the right thing to do. It's a better future for the next 7 generations. My kids, grandkids, you guys, probably don't, many of you have kids yet, but, the future. But it's also, it's a huge opportunity for us. I think it can make us world leaders in new technologies, in innovation, exactly the space we want to be, and the jobs that you guys probably want, because I know a lot of you are looking for green jobs. You're looking for jobs that not only, you get some money out of them, but also they're better for the planet. So, alors, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for your time.
So encore à Alex.
And we need to act on it.
We're good.
I don't think I've taken this.
No, I think you're fine. I'll ad-lib. So, Minister, on behalf of everyone here, thank you very much for the tireless work you do on behalf of Canadians on this fight for climate change of ours, which is, as you mentioned, a global fight. So a hand of applause for the Minister again, please. Thank you. So at this point, I'd like to invite Will Gadd to speak. Come on up. It's your turn. Your turn to shine.
Thanks very much. Cool, it all works. First off, thanks for having me, and I'm coming here, and it's exciting to be here. I normally get to hang out with like sheep and goats and stuff, so major upgrade, got Minister and all of you, appreciate that. And I want to talk about where I come from and what I'm seeing out there in the mountains and the environment. So I grew up in the Canadian Rockies, getting hauled around by my dad like this, and this was every weekend we'd go out there. Mountains are permanent. It's like they're there forever, the glaciers are there forever, and that's how it's going to be. And then I got more and more into this ice climbing sport, and I love this. You're not thinking about problems in your life when you're hanging on an icicle. This was awesome. Ice climbing is the best thing ever, and I got fired up to do more and more things with ice. I've done things like kayak down glaciers on the rivers, and then I spend a lot of time kayaking on the rivers that come out from glaciers. That's also where my drinking water comes from. And from my perspective, the world is pretty awesome when it's cold and icy. I'm not a fan of summer. I think it's overrated. I've also spent some time doing things like climbing under glaciers, just tons of different experiences with ice. This is awesome. I've climbed icebergs and off the coast of Labrador, one of the coolest things I've ever done. And Niagara Falls, that was pretty fun. Don't recommend doing that. And I do this not because it's some sort of like thrill-seeking adrenaline thing, although that's part of it, but because ice to me is just endlessly fascinating and interesting and fun. And it changes from water to ice and snow, and you can do really cool things with it, and I love it. But I'm starting to see some problems in my world. I also do a lot of paragliding. And so flying over the Canadian Rockies and other mountain ranges, you can look down and see where the glaciers used to be. It's not complicated. It's like there's the trees end, and there should be trees, but there's not, all the way up to the sides of what you see there. Everything that's sort of chunks of little isolated patches of ice used to be connected. And you look down at this, and it's like, okay, what's going on? I also do a lot of guiding in the mountains, and the routes that I take people up in the mountains are changing. I used to step onto the ice here, charge up the mountain, we're good to go, but there's no ice. And my guest is looking at me like, where's the ice? And it's a little bit of a problem. But this is all relatively dealable. You know, I see these graphs, and usually I sort of fall asleep shortly afterwards that shows the world warming up by 1 degree. But in my world, it's changing quite quickly. But it was all sort of, you could sort of handle it. It was like, okay, it's changing, but I'll just do things a bit different. We're all good here. You know, I'm from Alberta, and typically Alberta does not respond super well to climate change suggestions. But it started to get super kind of personal when I couldn't do what I wanted to do anymore. This is in Sweden. It's in February. They've had a race on this lake every year for 40 years with ice motorcycles and stuff. And I show up there, and there is no ice to go climbing with. I'm like, well, this hasn't happened before, and it happened the next 3 years in a row, and I couldn't do my thing. And I ended up getting down inside this mine. That was the only ice we could find in Sweden.
Oh my God.
And this ice has all since melted. And it's been there for several hundred years down in this mine. Everywhere I go, nobody ever says, well, it used to be a lot warmer here. It's always colder wherever I go. You know, things are kind of going sideways. About 3 years ago, I did a trip to Africa. You know, the Canadian Rockies, okay, they're changing really quickly. There's trees that are growing up into the alpine. We're seeing different species. All the pine trees are dying by pine beetle. No problem, we got this. I'll just go to Africa. So I showed up in Africa, and I had this map, and it showed that the entire summit of Kilimanjaro was ice. Ha-ha. I've got this all figured out. This is in the middle of the world, around near the equator. There shouldn't be any problem with ice going away there. Unfortunately, all that ice, if you look at it, it's like kilometers and kilometers of ice up there. And I was fired up. And I showed up there, and things looked a little bit different.
Whoa.
There just wasn't any. It was like, that used to be several hundred meters thick, and there's no ice there. And it's kind of a problem, you know, like there shouldn't be a desert on top of Kilimanjaro. There's been ice there for hundreds of thousands of years. And it's survived all kinds of massive oscillations in temperatures. And I started talking to the locals. They're like, well, we can't grow our crops because we're not getting water off our normal wet seasons anymore. And it's a problem for me as an ice climber, but it's a much bigger problem for the people that live there in that environment. This is sort of a sporting take on it. And I started to realize that I was going to have to do things and look at the world differently. That's all that's left is something that used to be literally like about 5 kilometers by 10 kilometers. That's it. And it's not there anymore. And this picture is only taken a few years ago. So what I want to do professionally is under threat. And it's a problem. It's really obvious. For me, climate change isn't sort of, well, it's happening next week, and when the world gets 1 degree warmer on the graph, it's like, this is now. It's not a future problem, it's a current problem, and it's a big one. And it's not maybe as big of a problem for me as it is for my kids. You know, things are gonna change radically. The ski season is a lot shorter where I live in the Canadian Rockies. You can't have races below about 2,200 meters anymore for Nordic skiing in most of the world. Things are changing so fast. It's happening now. And I don't think it's stoppable in the sense that it's going to change and everything's going to go back to normal. It's how we adapt to it and what we do with it. Now, adaptation is important as humans, right? You know, this is how we store our kids in the Canadian Rockies. But it's this big question, not of how things are going to change, but an expectation now that they are going to be different. Things are going to happen radically. What was the skating season on the Canal here this year? Short? Yeah. I mean, occasionally you're going to get a rip in winter, but that's going to continue to happen. It's going to change our lives. My kids are probably not going to be doing as much skating in their lives as I was able to do. And it's a bigger impact all over the world. And the graph that, as I started to dig into this and research, and the graph that I'm interested in is this carbon dioxide graph. You've got 400,000 years where it kind of bumped along in a relatively narrow range, and then it's gone insane. And this is happening now. We're just starting to feel the effects of this. And that's pretty scary to me. And it's also maybe got some opportunities. So what I'm trying to do now is use my sports to go out on expeditions with scientists globally and study climate change using some of my skills and maybe have an impact on how the world goes. 2 minutes, you got it. There's some sound here too, I believe. I'll talk about it. We're hiking along and I'm saying...
almost a kilometer horizontally in my lifetime. I remember this place as a kid. And then much more vertically as well. But we've melted out a glacier that used to be thick, and it's just it's all gone. It really is amazing. Like, climate change is not just some idea on a graph. It's like, this is it. It's happening. You got a little bit of a step down, then it's quite good underneath your feet there. Yep, got it. So as an explorer or an athlete, the cool idea is to go down and figure out how the meltwater moves through the glacier. But very few people have been into those systems to any depth or any degree at all. So we could actually learn something new. And I think that's cool. Wow, this is getting pretty real. Things are starting to feel kind of real.
Yeah, one thing strikes me here. See the red streak on the wall there?
Yes.
Biofilm.
That's
I
biofilm.
think so, yeah. So there are organisms living down here. We found insects in one of the holes in the wall.
Really?
There, yeah. And quite a few bits of this stuff.
I mean, you look at a glacier, you think there's no way there's anything living there.
He can't come down here otherwise, right? He needs someone who's got your skill set to get himself all the way down
And
here.
I don't understand this environment, so it's a perfect pairing.
It's a great partnership.
The coolest thing about this for me is that I've spent my whole life ice climbing, yet now I'm using the skills to do something totally different and help explore under glaciers. And that is, for me, really cool. And it's nice to make a contribution that way. And then the other thing from a pure adventure athlete that I think is cool is, like, nobody's been here. There's no map of this. And it's real exploration. And we've got things to go and do down there. So life is pretty good on, every possible way right now. It's awesome. So we've been working on figuring out how the meltwater, literally how the glacier melts and moves through and underneath it. And this has a big impact on the rate of glacial recession globally. So I'm doing projects. This one was with the National Science and Technology Museum, but also doing other projects in Antarctica and Greenland. And you get to have fun doing this too. The best times in life are where you can adapt to the environment that you're in and do something that's fun there that also changes the world on a small scale. And it's about my kids also. You know, I want to have a world where they do the same things as I got to do with my dad and my parents and get out in the mountains and explore. So as we talk about this, I'm really honored to be here. You're the future. I'm going to try and help with that a bit, but you get to change it and make it what you want. And I think that's awesome. And I wish you the best of luck with that. If you have any questions, send me an email. And thank you. And thank you to the minister. And
we didn't hear that. Go. Getting all our notes mixed up. So I used to say, I still say I have the coolest job in the world because I get to do a bunch of fun stuff, but you're a close second, Will, I got to tell you. Close second. So thank you, Will, for speaking to us today and sharing some of your experience. At this point, I'd like to invite Andrea Brazeau to come and speak to us this afternoon. Come on over, Andrea. Yeah.
Which one is the...
Lavar.
Okay. Sivulipame nako mera mabungata maneron narama. Before I present, I always do this where I say thank you in Inuktitut because that's my first language and it's the language I'm most comfortable speaking, yeah. Okay, so as we know, climate change is happening. We know this, except Donald Trump doesn't know this. Just kidding, yeah. Okay, I'm from a small community in northern Quebec called Kangiqsualujjuaq. Try saying that once. I grew up camping a lot, hunting. The Inuit there are very connected to the land as soon as we're born, camping all our lives. So we do see these changes, and I'm going to have a story. My next slide. That's me. With my first caribou, and when I did my presentation about climate change, I share this story because it's important to me. Anyway, this is me with my first caribou. It took me 6 hours by snowmobile to get to the hunting grounds where the caribou were. And 15 years ago, there used to be caribou just beside the airport, which is like 2 kilometers outside of town, but this is not the case anymore. And I'm not saying it's only climate change that's affecting the animals, but it is a factor. And that's amazing because 15 years ago, if you were 13 years old, you would have known how to hunt and skin a caribou. But my 13-year-old brother now, he's never seen a caribou that's alive. You have to travel long distances, and sometimes you don't even see caribou. And as Inuit, hunting is very important to us. It brings us pride. So when we don't hunt, we lose a part of our identity. It's like if you play sports or exactly what you do, ice climbing, and when you're not able to ice climb and we're not able to hunt, we lose a part of who we are. So that's an example. And here's Inuit cutting up seal meat. I'm sorry if these pictures are disturbing. Anyway. Another important thing when thinking about climate change is the knowledge of the elders. This woman here is Susie Morgan and her sister Sarah Pasha. I got the privilege to interview Susie Morgan to gain some of her knowledge. She gave me a list of things she's noticed, but I won't say them all because I have 7 minutes. But one of the things I found incredible was she told me that her grandfather, when we set nets, we make a hole in the ice with an ice drill, but back in the day, they used an ice chisel. And she told me that when her father was making a hole in the ice, he needed to create stairs to get back up because the ice was so thick. But now it's like 4 or 5 feet. Like, that's crazy. So that was another example. And another example was they're not able to pass down the knowledge of the weather to their children and their grandchildren because the weather is less predictable now. They used to know and they used to be able to share their knowledge, but this isn't the case anymore. And I have a whole list if you want to ask me about other things later. Yeah. Okay, you're probably wondering why does she have pictures of food on here? But when talking about climate change and the effects of Inuit, how it's affecting us, as I said, it affects our animals, it affects our knowledge of where the animals are. So when we don't know where the animals are, or even if there are no animals around, we are forced to shop locally. But we only have 2 stores in our community, the Northern and the Co-op, and they're so expensive. So the picture up here is a bag of grapes, and it's for $31. And no, we can't grow our own grapes because, yeah, we can't. And down below it is a picture of fried chicken for $51 a bag. And water, everyone should have access to water, $10. I know, crazy. So what I'm trying to say here is, what my point is, when you think about climate change, yes, it's affecting the ice, it's affecting the animals, but we often forget about the people living there, the Inuit living there. So when you think about the changes, think about how the changes affect the people as well and how we're being affected, because climate change is an issue and it needs to be addressed. And I just want you guys to know that the people are being affected as well as the ice and the animals. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. C'est pas quelque chose qui est toujours facile.
It's not easy to share your stories when we're facing people and when we're live.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Gadd. So I'm now going to be opening the floor up for questions, but first we do have a video question for Minister McKenna, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll turn it over to the video.
My name's Alupa Ipu. I'm from Kangiqsualujjuaq. I want to ask someone how you can help us with the climate changes in the north, because I've been noticing our town changing a lot. The river has been melting faster, and it's been melting. The snow has rarely been coming here. Every year it's been changing. In the other communities, I don't know if they have had this happen, but I would want to know if you could help us with this.
Did we get to the end of that question?
I think I got.
Go for it.
Am on? So yes, I mean, and so thank you, Andrea. I mean, it is affecting the way people live, and no more so than in the north. I've heard a lot of stories about hunters going through the ice in their snowmobiles because they can no longer tell the thickness of the ice. And it's causing a disconnection between generations because, you know, going out hunting was something that you did with your family. And if you're not able to do that, you're not able to have the same bond and the same relationship and to pass on your culture. So, I mean, there's a number of things, obviously, we need to do. We all need to be working together to tackle climate change because the Arctic is the canary in the coal mine. And as I said by my example, when it melts, you have rising waters that impact other places. One of the things, so there's obviously a huge number of things you need to do to tackle climate change in our climate plan. We've done a number of things. But one of the things I know communities in the north really want to do is they want to be part of the solution. And in many northern communities, they're using diesel. Diesel is really polluting, but it's the main source of energy. It's how you heat your homes, turn on your lights. So we've committed as a government to investing and working with communities to find solutions so you can get off diesel, so that you can move towards renewables. I think we have an opportunity to really innovate in this space. There's all sorts of different things that you can do, like solar, although battery storage is an issue, so we have to innovate around that. But there's lots of small-scale solutions, and it's also an opportunity to really get communities involved, because people want to be involved. I'm sure you guys want to be involved in part of the solution, and I know these communities, they don't want to be spewing diesel. They want to have cleaner fuels. Once again, it also will clean up the air, so it has health benefits. So just one small example, but I think to make sure that that your homeland doesn't melt, we're going to have to take a whole variety of different measures, and the whole world really is going to have to come together, and we're going to have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you, Minister. So for anybody here in the audience, for the next questions, we have a mic over here on your right and on your left. So if you do have a question, we are forcing you to come up to the mic. So it'll
Just
be great.
do it.
I saw some of you writing some questions down, so we need an icebreaker. Oh, there we go.
Yay! The first question. Woohoo!
This on? Wait, 1 sec. I have 2 questions actually. The first one, you mentioned working closely with the Obama administration. Do you see yourself working just as closely with the Trump administration, seeing as he believes climate changes are also perpetrated by the Chinese?
It's good. Start with the easy questions.
Yeah.
That's the first question.
Okay. Do you want me to answer the first question?
Yes.
Look, I mean, you got to work with who you got to work with. The Prime Minister met with the President. They had a good meeting last week. They issued a declaration, which in my world is important. They talked about how we have always worked together on clean air, on clean water, and they talked about clean energy innovation. So I think there's a real window there to work in those areas, but I'm also a realist. We're going to be working with states. A lot of states are moving forward very quickly to tackle climate change, like states like California, states like New York, and even states that are Republican states who have really embraced renewables. I'm also going to be working with cities. A lot of cities, including cities in Canada, that are doing really, really great work, that recognize they need to be doing their part. And I'm going to be working with businesses in the United States. And you'd be pretty surprised, actually. 600 businesses, everything from Google and Microsoft, which you might say usual suspects, to Levi Strauss and Mars, wrote a letter to the president, at that time it was President-elect Trump, and said, hey, you know what? You need to we want you to continue climate action. We want you to stay in the Paris Agreement, because we think this is a huge opportunity for us, and we don't want to be left behind. We want the solutions. We want to be innovating. We want to create the jobs of the future. So I'm just going to keep on working hard with the United States, with whomever is committed to working hard on climate action. I'm going to talk about the economic case. Every government, including the new U.S. administration, wants good jobs. We know the renewable sector, the clean tech sector, is growing faster than other sectors of the economy. And so I think there's a real opportunity, and I'm going to be working internationally. I think Canada has a real opportunity to continue to play a leadership role. We're going to continue to push hard. We're going to continue to work with Indigenous leaders internationally to recognize the role of traditional knowledge in tackling climate change. I'm recognizing, Indigenous peoples. And I think this is a great thing for Canada. And I think what's really good, what really gives me heart, is that there is strong support in Canada. Of course, not everyone. I'm always trying to bring more people on board, but I think that we have a real opportunity here.
Okay. My second question ties in with a bit of what you said. You said something about working on clean energy and clean water. Now, as you may know, President Donald John Trump issued a bunch of executive orders rolling back a bunch of laws previous President Obama made on coal companies dumping coal extracts into rivers Now, it seems like you guys have two different ideas on what to do in regards to clean energy and clean water. How do you see that? How do you see the relationship between Canada and U.S. Working with that?
I mean, I think it's the same thing. Like you just have to work together. I mean, I don't make regulations for the United States. They don't make regulations for Canada. But water, air don't know borders. We share the Great Lakes. We share the air. So I think we do need to work together. And I think there's a real opportunity to cooperate. And I'm gonna keep on pushing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're going to go over here on the left, and if that's the cue for the lines for the
Oh, well, we better
questions-
really, I'll be way faster.
No, that's not what I was
Yes,
implying,
no,
but
yes,
let's,
no.
Let's make the questions quick, and let's try to get through everybody here. This is great. Go ahead,
Okay,
please,
hi.
over here on the left.
Okay, so climate change is described as the rate of change problem because, like, the rate of all the documented climate changes is unheard of in history and stuff. So, and like experts say that we have to like slow down the rate at which we're forcing changes, but we live in an economic system based on growth of like countries like China, where like they're industrializing at like an extraordinary rate, and North America relies on China, like their factories to buy their goods and sell them. So how do we make realistic economic changes while keeping both economies healthy and slowing down the rate of climate change?
Wow, good question.
So that's a really good question, and it could be a really long answer, but you have to do both. People need jobs. Like if I go and we come up with ideas that'll mean that no one has any jobs, it's just not going to work. And that goes as much for, I've always said this, for people who work in the energy sector in Alberta as it goes for an environmentalist. So we need to find solutions, but we need to have the right policies in place. That's why one of the policies I'm most proud of is the fact we're pricing what we don't want, which is pollution. That's really important because when you price what you don't want, businesses figure out cleaner ways to do things. And that's what we want. We want new technologies. We want innovation. And that's the huge opportunity for us.
Thank you. Okay, so over to the right.
You got to go for these. You're sort of like getting off scot-free here.
Yeah, you're getting all the easy questions apparently. Yeah. Go ahead.
So would you say that Canada's oil economy is dependent on other giants like OPEC and the USA? Or would you say that we can sustain our own economy and we don't need them? And can you explain why?
You guys are like really going for like the easy questions. I mean, look, I guess like that's a really big question, actually, even beyond climate change. But what I'll say is that we are lucky to have natural resources. We have abundant natural resources. We've created a lot of wealth by developing our natural resources, the energy sector. But, eventually we need to be moving to cleaner sources of energy. And when I go to see the oil sands, they're doing things in a much cleaner way. But we know we're, in a transition, and we all need to be in this together, and we're going to have to innovate, and we're going to have to find solutions, but we're not turning off the lights tomorrow, right? Like, we just don't have enough renewable capacity right now, and that's why putting a price on carbon, that's why phasing out coal, that's why focusing on innovation and how we're going to invest in innovation is so important, because we all know we need to move to a cleaner future. It's not just Canada, the whole world. 195 countries agreed that we need to keep temperatures below 2 degrees increase, aiming for 1.5. And so it's like all hands on deck now, and we got to look at all the different opportunities to move forward.
Thank you.
So we'll keep going over to the left now.
All right, so my name is Daniel. I'm a grade 12 student at Colonel By. So
Yay.
this question is directed at Minister
Colonel
Catherine
Who's here
McKenna.
from Colonel By?
All right, so in 2011, under the conservative government, Canada pulled out of the Kyoto Protocol, and the former Environment Minister, Peter Kent, called the Liberal government that signed it incompetent. So, and for signing and not making the necessary changes to cut greenhouse gas emissions, which led to an inability to meet the quotas that they were legally bound to meet. So what has changed from 2011 to now that makes the government think that they can reduce greenhouse gas emissions when they couldn't do so when they were legally obliged to?
So what's different is we have a plan. You can have targets, but they're worth nothing if you don't have a plan to get there. So that's why we spent a whole year going through and doing modeling and working with provinces and territories to say, okay, here's our target, but more importantly, what are we going to do to get there? And so that's why we have a whole series of different measures to making more energy efficient buildings, to looking at how we have more electric vehicles, better public transportation, to phasing out things like coal, which we don't want, to focusing on innovation in the clean tech space, because you got to do things across the board, and it's a lot of work. It was a lot of work for my team, and I've got to do a big shout out to all the public servants who worked really hard. Also environmentalists, they weighed in, they gave us the solutions, the provinces and territories were there, Indigenous leaders were there, industry was there, and now we have a concrete plan. And I think we need to be more ambitious. I mean, we have to start implementing all of these measures, and then we have to look at how we can do more. And that's exactly what the world needs to do. In the Paris Agreement, every 5 years, every country's got to come back and show how they're going to improve. But this is the first time, and I'm very proud of this. This is the first time we have a very concrete plan that sets out how we're actually going to meet our targets, because a plan without targets is worthless.
Am I allowed to ask a follow-up question?
I don't know.
Just
I
like
think we got a
quick.
lot of people.
Real quick.
Make it quick.
All right. So in 1990, which is when the Kyoto Protocol was introduced internationally, or thereabouts, to 2002 when it was actually introduced in Canada, are you saying that there was no concrete plan from 1990 to 2002 where they had 12 years?
And you know what? I'm saying that, and I'm a liberal, but there just wasn't enough will in Canada to actually get there to take really serious measures. And that's the difference now, that Canadians, I think, realize that climate change is real. Like, you're hearing examples. It's not just the North, though. I mean, I think we get, the North is the canary in the coal mine. There are huge changes. But look at what we're seeing in Alberta. I mean, we're seeing massive forest fires. We're seeing Prince Edward Island. I guess anyone here from Prince Edward Island? Probably not. Oh, yes. Hey, Prince Edward Island. Oh, we got a few. Prince Edward Island shrinking by 43 centimeters a year. We're seeing flooding. We're seeing droughts. We're seeing a canal that the time on the canal is a lot shorter. Ski hills aren't even opening. Like, it's a change that's happening, and I think Canadians realize that it's real, and that now, if we don't step up now, when are we going to step up?
All right, thank you, and good luck in your endeavors.
Well, you're part of this. Don't think you're getting off. I hope you rode your bike here.
So we have a lot of poli-sci and journalist students in the crowd today. Go ahead.
All right, I have a question for Minister McKenna.
For a change.
What will be the future of? There have been several pipelines that have caused controversy over the last few years, especially coming into a new year with a new U.S. administration. What will be the future of these pipelines?
So we approved a few pipelines, and I know that people were wondering, especially I've heard from young people, like, what are you doing? Why would you approve pipelines? Pipelines aren't the problem. The problem is we're still dependent on fossil fuels, and that's the problem. Like, if there's a demand, you will get, oil and gas will go to market. They'll go by rail, which is way more dangerous, as we know from Lac Mégantic. But we need to move off. We know that. You can't do it overnight. So I think, we need to be very smart about what we're doing. We need to make sure that we move forward and that we have a plan for jobs, because you can easily get voted out of office. We saw in the United States, we have a big change in administrations. If you aren't connected with people, if you aren't explaining to them how taking climate action is actually good, that you're still going to have a job. In fact, maybe you'll have a better job. That if you're in coal, you'll maybe be working in renewables, or your kids will be. You have to have a vision. And so I think that's really important. But on the pipelines piece, it's really important to note that Alberta has come a long way. Alberta has a hard cap on emissions from the oil sands, and that includes anything that comes from pipelines. So there is a plan there, but of course we all need to be looking at how do we move towards renewables? How do we make sure, right now, actually, I don't know if you know this, but 80% of our power is clean. We have renewables, and we have hydro, we have nuclear in some cases, but we need to make sure that it's 100% clean, and we have to change how we get to places. We have to stop driving in cars that spew out carbon dioxide. We need to be moving to electric vehicles. We need to have more energy efficient houses. It's not going to happen overnight, but we have to start being really serious about this, and it starts right now.
Thank you for the insight.
Great, over to the left.
So we have a question that was sent in by a school. So the students are concerned about humans' short-term views and wonder how we can really make humans see we need to make changes. So could all three of you perhaps speak to that?
Start with Will, give the minister a chance to catch her breath.
I
I think we have to take what we're seeing as real and limit the future damage. I think we're already going to deal with massive change. We have to take it as real and not pretend it's not happening, and embrace it and figure out how to work with it and jump in there and not just stick our heads in the sand. I think that's done. Like, the train has gone. It's just a question of how far it's going to go and how we're going to deal with it. It's my view. So it's you. In fact, it's people out there looking at this on Facebook. It's them. It's not us, really. You, maybe.
Could you repeat that question, please?
Sure.
Sorry.
So, because humans have such a short-term perspective,
Mm-hmm.
they're concerned about how we can really make humans see that we need to make changes.
I think by working together, I'm kind of confused, but yeah, working together and having a plan, I think that's the most important thing, because it's happening, but working together and I apologize. That wasn't a great answer.
Oh, no.
So I actually think the answer is telling stories.
Yeah.
And I think you guys have done a great job because you told stories about your lives. Because everything is about how do we imagine we want to live? Like, what do we want our future to look like? And you guys are too young. Do you know the Jetsons? Yeah. It's quite cool, eh? Okay. But I always say, like, the future is not, if you just say we want the future to look like the Jetsons, everyone's going to say, yeah, whatever. We're not going to do that. People have to see that there are real changes that you can make in your life. Like, you can decide that you're not going to waste as much, that you're not going to go and buy a new outfit every weekend, that you're going to ride your bicycle, that you're going to push your parents to do a lot more, that you're going to be part of the solution, and you're going to get up every day and kind of talk to your friends about it, and that you're going to tell stories about what's already happening so that people understand it's real. And you're going to talk about how the ice is disappearing, because we all relate to stories. I think that you can get talking about like carbon pricing and targets, and the end's like people are like, it's not very compelling. It doesn't get you motivated to act. I think it's like the real stories. Like when I hear stories like yours, when I hear stories about how our ice is disappearing, ice which is so fundamental to being Canadian, our winter. I think that's what gets people excited. I think it's when I go out and I go to a factory in Winnipeg, and I go see how they're making electric buses that are totally revolutionizing, and you see how it's there, it's already happening, that we can all get it and make choices. I think those are the things that get us excited because they're real. And I think we have to get real about this. It's not about targets. Of course it's about targets, but it's actually about what can we all do in our lives working together to make a better future.
Okay, so we're going to have time for 2 more questions. So I'm apologizing in advance.
Do you want to bundle questions? Do you want to bundle them and we can take
sounds
maybe?
good. Like it's let's try to see what we have. Both of you folks over to the right, if you want to ask your questions. Yeah, and then we'll try to see how we can put this together a little.
Okay. So kind of building on what you just said about Minister McKenna, about telling stories and the importance there, and about what the discussion has been all day about innovation and the practical ways to fight climate change, what do you think are the most effective means, and this is a question for all 3 of you, of encouraging and enabling people of our age and everyone in society to actually have the power and not just know that they have the power to do things? Do you think there's ways we can get involved to actually encourage entry into entrepreneurship, for example, to create more innovative or more sustainable products? How do you think the country can move in the direction of being a leader in that front?
Okay, so that was the first question, and then let's try the second one and see if we can combine some of these.
It's a bit specific. As you know, nuclear energy is really efficient, safe for the environment in terms of no carbon production, and it's currently the energy solution which can tackle fossil fuels till the renewables improve head-on. So with the recent Stanford's new technique to extract uranium from oceans, and private companies like SpaceX making rocket flights cheaper to dispose nuclear waste in the space, do you think Canada or the world itself should aim for nuclear energy?
So how about we do this? How about for the first question, we'll go over to Andrea and Will, and then the second question for the minister, if that's okay. And then we'll try to do this in 45 seconds so we can get a couple more questions in.
I think I'm well above my pay grade here in your answer. I'm a pro athlete. But what I do see in the world that's really cool is wherever I go, new technologies are making a huge difference. In the Himalaya, there's microhydro, and everybody's got LED lights and solar panels. And this is how people who have to get their energy in different ways because they don't have reliance on diesel and other things, and they're making it work. And it's primarily young people, and they're switched on and fired up, but I think there's a huge opportunity for people who just look at the world differently to do so. You know, the older generation, not to make a bad reference, but is fossilized in some ways. It's like, we must have oil, and that's the way it is. And it's not that way. There's lots of cool ways to get energy in the world, and I think your generation is going to go forth and rock it. That's my view.
So thank you, Will. So I'll let the minister take the last question that was asked there, and then I do apologize for everybody standing up. We're about to get yanked off the stage here by the hook. So Minister, if you would like to take the last question that the gentleman on the right asked over here.
Well, so I will answer the first one too. I'm going to throw it back at you guys. You guys are like way younger than me. You can go and you can get together with your friends and you can say, maybe your school, we're going to have a target. So I know I say, hey, targets, I actually love them because it forces action. And we're going to reduce emissions at our school by 30%. How would we do it? Go through the same exercise we went through it. Figure out where, what are the things you can practically do in your life? Go in science class, try to innovate. There are many ways that we can do things in a smarter way, like waste less, start campaigns. Get motivated, get out there, and push your parents and push your grandparents to be part of this. You guys are way more organized on social media. You are way savvier than we ever were. You're way connected than we ever were. So how about you guys help us out and do that? On the nuclear piece, look, it's interesting that nuclear is actually quite divisive in the environmental movement as well. There's issues around nuclear waste. As you say, it's a source that could really help us out in the shorter term. We already do use significant nuclear power here in Ontario. But there's no consensus. And in these things, it's harder if you don't have people coming together and they're divided. But you guys are all in, right? Okay, come on, that's super lame. Are you all in? Okay, look how we're all in. We're lifting this, so now we need you, because honestly, it is about your future. And you can pretend this isn't happening, but it is happening, it's real, and we need your solution. So you also have an opportunity of $5,000. Who doesn't want $5,000? Alors, j'ai besoin de vos innovations.
We need your innovation. You could come to Prince Edward Island and present your project to see how it's getting smaller.
Get to come hang out in Prince Edward Island with me and my counterparts.
Great. So listen, on behalf of everybody here, Minister, Andrea, and Will, a big hand of applause for our panelists today. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here. I also want to congratulate you on the level of questions that you came up with today was very excellent. So a big thank you for everyone watching us and to everybody in the audience. Before we leave, I would like to take an opportunity to say that some of our colleagues actually were in Inukjuak, and we do have a message from Andrea from someone that you know there actually. So I've been told that we'll be playing this video right now.
Hi Andrea, I miss you.
That's my
hopefully
cousin.
go in George River soon. How's it in Montreal? I know it's hard for you to move down because you were so close to the community. You're a great support to the community too. I'm sure that the community misses you, and you should move back up.
I will.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your time today. Thank you.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's my cousin.
That's your cousin.
Yes.
Wow.
Thank you.